Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, Namaste comes from the Sanskrit. Spoken, it means Brahmi, and it means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. On the other side of the world, from the Mayan civilization, in Lak'ech simply means I am another you. So imagine here's two ancient notifications, if you will, that we can apply today in how we see ourselves and others. Imagine the change that could happen as a result. Check it out. Try it for yourself. Don't believe me? Test it for yourself. See what happens. All right, so this week's guest is Alex Moses. Alex is a really interesting character. I really like his dynamic and where he's coming from. He's a CEO, founder, and venture capitalist at Profit Proof. He's the chief executive officer with SB Accounting. He's got a doctorate in philosophy from my homeland back in Indiana State University, or Indiana University at Bloomington, actually. And he's got a master in accounting and economics from UCLA Anderson School of Management. Now, the interesting thing about Alex is that at 23, he became a certified life coach. And at 29, he sold his business for 9 figures. And then shortly later started a school that got up to over $1 million a month within 18 months. So here's a guy that's been able to take that etheric understanding, if you will, and make it very practical and pragmatic in the world. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. Alex, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, cool. I'm glad you're here too. And I'm thankful that we had a chance to connect. Now, in this understanding you've had, I mean, you started really young as far as being a life coach and going in that direction. So I would imagine there were probably some things that you understood maybe more deeply than most early on in life. Can you remember or identify maybe some situations that offered you a kind of an expanded view of reality when you were younger?
At the age of 17, I ended up in Italy, and I didn't have any legal paperwork, nor had any money, so pretty much ended up homeless. And I had to find a way to survive, and one of the guys told me you can go wash windows and just live for whatever the people give you. And I decided, okay, I don't have a choice, either kill myself or try to do it. So I went and started washing the windows. And after a while or so, I started seeing some money. So I had enough money to live off. And I had a guy who came to me. And he saw that I was struggling before, and he was same as me. He was an immigrant as well. And he goes, what do you do to make money? I was like,
Where did you come from originally?
Ukraine.
Okay.
So I was born in Ukraine. So I became a refugee from Ukraine. That's how I ended up in Italy at 17. And so the story was, he came to me, he goes, how do you make money? I said, okay, I go wash windows and ask people to give me money. Some people give, some people don't, some nice, some angry. So that's life. I don't have anything else to do. He goes, okay, let me think about it. And he comes to me the next day, he goes, I cannot do this. I cannot just go and beg people and say, how about if I wash the windows and you ask for money? I said, okay. Because he was a lot older. He was in his 30s. He had 2 kids, wife, and I need to help this guy. And I liked him. He was a nice guy. So, I'll help you. Then the next day he comes over. He goes, I have a friend who lives next to me. He's in the same position as we are. Can I bring him along? Can we do like 2 of us? I was okay. I can help him. I don't mind. It's more money for me because the idea was, he told me we'll split the money if I collect and he wash the windows. So it's a good gig. I'll collect twice as much and make the money. It's not bad. Sure. Yeah, so within a month, I had 30 people working for me. And I'm still in the country that I speak no language, still have no legal paperwork, and I have a company with 30 employees. And the whole idea is not that I was smart or anything. The whole idea was just helping people because they just couldn't do it. And I understood that it can be very lucrative financially just by helping people.
Isn't that amazing how just reaching your hand out to assist another, the reciprocation that takes place, in your case, exponentially over time? Now, what do you think is the essence of that as far as, I mean, you mentioned the essence, I guess, and that would be simply the desire to help others.
Yeah. And that's all it was. That's all it started. I didn't try to build a business. I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
I just tried it to make some money so I can live off, have a place, have a roof over my head, have some food. I didn't even thought it's going to be anything more than that. People
In the
keep
learning
coming.
in that, when you were going through that and watching this business build, what was going on inside of you as far as what you were observing and how you were taking that in and integrating it?
I just loved it. I just enjoyed the environment of that community, and everybody's nice to you and people respect you, and you're like 17-year-old. But
Right.
the people who's in their 30s and 40s looking at you as somebody who's like responsible for their family income. This is like very, very, very humbling experience.
Absolutely. Now and tremendously so. Humility is a great thing that we often overlook in stepping into specific roles and being of service, and not just to others, to ourselves, right? Because it's reciprocal in that place. Now, it's interesting how, ultimately you're talking about people being happy in life, and that what prompted that or what enabled that was simply trade. And what's interesting is that I had another guest some time ago. His name was Doug Brunke. He's CEO of the Global Chamber, and which they're now in, I think, 535 metro areas in 190 some odd countries. And what his view of it, trade produces peace. Good trade produces peace. And it creates the trust and the integrity and the community building and all the other aspects that we look for on a daily basis, right, in our lives. And yet here's one instance, and the way you went through the process of just being available and looking at what could be done and how you could help, then develop this entire burgeoning industry for you, right? How do you think we could learn from that, and our viewers and as well? What can we integrate and move into our own lives? What are the maybe simple practical things that you could offer for a younger generation that's, and even older generation now, that's faced with having to recreate their lives due to the pandemic?
Um, as a business owner, I didn't need pandemic to have problems.
Yeah, I hear
Because
that.
in a businesses, I always tell when people get in the business, there's only one law prevails 100%. That's a Murphy law.
Yeah.
Everything that can go wrong will. Every other law is, it might happen, it might not happen, but Murphy law is 100% of the time in every business.
Now, why do you think that is? We speak of this, it's kind of an axiom, and yes, it happens. And there's that question of, okay, why does this happen? What's the purpose for these things going wrong for us?
There's always a purpose. The purpose in life is to learn. And we do not learn from successes, we learn from failures. And we grow from failures, we don't grow from successes. From successes, we develop an ego. That fail kind of levels it up.
Speaking of humility,
Back
right?
in check and goes, okay, you're not that successful, you're not that smart because you just made all these mistakes. So I think it's the balance in life. There's always yin and yang, or like the sign behind me. There's always going to go ups and downs in every single business. And it's not to look at it as a down, look at it as a lesson. And to start, if you understand basic concepts of making a lot of little things instead of trying to make one big thing, can get you a lot further away, and you can become a lot more successful by improving 1% at a time instead of trying to double or triple your performance. So the people come to me and they're saying, you know, I want to make $1 million a month. I'm saying, let's figure out how to make $1 a month first. And then if we scale it, you know, at 1% and compound interest, you're going to be a billionaire before you know it. But if you don't know how to make $1, there's no point to jump to $1 million.
Right, right.
But people miss that concept that you have to start small. You have to do like baby steps before you become like a professional athlete. You have to be comfortable, and you have to understand their hormonal state of motivation, what motivates you to move forward, because most people think that people's motivation is success, but it's not, it's in the process.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we do miss that. You know, there were a couple of things came to mind as you were talking, that in this, the incremental steps, the little things. My dad used to say, you take care of the little things, big things will take care of themselves. Even Jack Canfield, you know, don't sweat the small stuff. And it's all small stuff. And we often miss that because we get caught up in the vision and don't realize that that's achieved through the incremental steps that we unpack in order to get there. Now, how does that process for you, how do you explain that to others in ways that kind of makes it simple enough for the idiot to understand?
Right. And that's another important thing. Things should be very, very simple. The reason I like Henry Ford, for example, most people do not even know the guy was illiterate. He didn't know how to read or write, nor he knew geography or anything else, and yet he was the founder and CEO of the most powerful company in the world. And the reason he became that successful because of who he was, a simple man without too much education and too much complicated stuff on his mind. So if you think about it, at the time of beginning of 1900s, he wanted to start building manufacturing cars in a big quantity, and people didn't even own cars. Most of the people couldn't afford cars. You cannot find mechanics to build cars. You cannot find anybody who knows how to work on those cars because you're the first one who's putting them to. How are you going to find the people to work at your factory? And yet he offered double, in some cases 3 times the minimum wage that they would work anywhere else, doing something that they know about. So the whole idea is to simplify things to the level that anybody can do the task and put it on conveyor belt to give a chance, the opportunity to the next person to do the task that they know, so you can teach them. So you can teach something very simple, pretty much anybody without any skills, and they can put together something as complex as a car. That's where the genius of Henry Ford was, and I believe every business has to operate this way.
How about personally? Wouldn't that apply as well on an individual basis, that we learn how to do those simple things and then compound those or integrate those into a larger scale? It's kind of like, you know, being our own project manager, right? Where we organize and orchestrate that learning process, and which takes us back to that challenge you were talking about earlier. And the reason I asked the question is that, you know, it is about learning. Our lives are filled with learning processes, and successes don't necessarily teach us much other than we did the right thing. What teaches us the most is those little incremental hiccups and mistakes along the way that then we learn from and inquire deeper about as to why they happened, and then integrate that back into the process, which takes us to a next level. So in that respect, does that kind of correlate with what you've learned, and could you expound on that a little?
Probably, because that's what we learn. We learn based on experience, and little things we learn, the more abilities we have to do big things. because it all starts from the little. It started like for me, washing windows, and up selling the company still in my 20s for 9 figures. And people think it's just luck, which is a big part of it, but understanding simple things, understanding how to work with people, how to make them happy, understand how to manage yourself and how to motivate yourself to do things that other people are not willing to do. So people can look up to you and give you the ability to lead those people.
Which is an amazing opportunity, full of responsibility when you're at that place. Now, how can you engage, or how can we, as people that may not have the discipline to do so, what are some of the things that can inspire, or motivation comes from within, inspiration generally comes from seeing something else and being inspired to take action, and then the aspiration part of that is what we want to become, right? So how does that kind of trifecta enter into the picture in developing the both the personal and the professional aspects of achievement in business?
When people come to me, I always look at one thing. I'm trying to help people. There's nothing else is in the way. I do not value at anything else. I don't value if there's a profit to be made, because the profit will be always a byproduct of the efforts. If the people need help with something, we can deliver something of a service that can actually help people in the way that they want to have it. That's what important. So in personal way is the same way. When talking to people, you want to talk to them in a way that it can actually help them instead of help you first. So you always come second, because people don't become happy by making money. They become happy by helping other people.
Very true. Now, why do you think is the push for acquisition so present in society today? And what are some of the ways that you see that changing in the nature of helping others first in order, that's an old Zig Ziglar thing, maybe even Dale Carnegie, or both, actually, help enough other people get what they want and you'll have what you desire. How does that, or do you even see that beginning to change today in the wake of the economic environment we're in?
Should not change, just the people operate from the fears. If we're going to go to Napoleon Hills, right, he's talking about 6 fears. We should not overlook this, because all the problems we have because people scared of something.
I heard the courage the other day. My wife and I, who's from St. Petersburg as well, she and I were watching the movie, and there was a thing about courage, and it's like, courage is fear that said its prayers.
I love it.
I thought that was just very simple, very profound in the ability to just, set the fears aside and move forward, because the fears are going to be there. We're built that way. It's assuaging those fears with activity, putting your attention, intention, and interaction towards a goal as opposed to the challenges in it. Because it depends on, if we're focusing on not making mistakes, well, our mind doesn't necessarily hear the not. It operates on the nouns or the action or the activity, which is making mistakes. On the other hand, if you look at it from, I want to do what is best for this process, it's a completely different perspective, and oftentimes that fearlessness enters in as a result. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, 100%. Every successful person that I ever met, and I work with some of the richest people in the world, everybody have fear. It's normal state, but understand that the fear has nothing to do with the real world. So if you can see the bus driving at you at 100 miles per hour, you might be scared, but you can just step away. You don't have to wait for it to hit you.
Right.
So fear will comes to you, you experience it, but you always have a way to step aside. You don't have to wait to destroy you. And I have only one plaque in my office because I have a lot of like pictures.
Right.
But the plaque, it says, doubt kills more, sorry, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. So don't be worried to fail.
Yeah, because doubt almost it keeps you from taking action.
100% of the time, which is
So
fear.
let's flip that then. So fear is the cause of constriction and inability to act. Let's say start there. So the other side of that equation, they say that love is the opposite of fear. So looking at from that perspective, and we kind of talked about this a little earlier, is that love is that the word is even missing in how we express it in our activities on both personal and professional levels. What difference do you think it would make, or is there a way to bring that back into conversations without the, oh my God, he's talking about love, kind of, right, response? Because for some reason, people seem really reticent to go to that place in their conversations anywhere. And of course, like T. Harv Eker says, what you do anywhere, you do everywhere. So how can we flip that? Or do you think we can?
I wrote a few quotes in my life. One of them actually is about love. So in my world, love is the absence of fear. It's not the opposite of fear.
Okay. I'd say that's more appropriate. Absolutely.
So how you cannot have love if you have fear? It means the fear paralyzes you. It doesn't let you do anything. Love is what moves you forward. Everything you do for love, whether you realize it or not. It's either for the love of what you're doing, or the love to your family, or the love for what you think to create.
Yeah, it's like a sense of fulfillment that is produced from being able to take care of folks and yourself. Now, how can, or do you, I say that, I believe we can. How do we bring this back into a relevant experience in the business world today, and in these transformations and the qualifications that have been put on the agile business development today in meeting the needs that are present and not necessarily operating from old paradigms?
There's a lot of people operate within love in their business, and they're very successful, and some really not. So it's a way, because for me, love is just, it's an energy. And energy is what makes everything in the world. Everything around us is energy. So when you love something, you feel good about something. So it gives you an energy to do something. And if you don't love something, you're not going to be as productive. So I think love is very important in the business, to love what you do, to love who you're doing it for, and love to yourself. I always use those three things as the three pillars to be successful, because with those things, it's almost impossible to achieve anything, or it's going to be very, very hard and frustrating, or you have to be like a psychopath. So if you're not a psychopath, that's some successful people are, the love has to be present, whether you're going to talk about it or ignore it. I don't think the world cannot survive without love. There can be nothing on this planet. Even I do gardening outside. If I want to put love into it, everything's going to die. There's going to be nothing. There's going to be no animals, no people, nothing on this planet will ever exist.
So it's kind of like
remove the love.
Yeah, it's kind of like the notion of just being a good human, or being a human being as opposed to a human doing, and the difference that makes. And you mentioned that love is just an energy, and of course now we know through the sciences, and especially particle physics and quantum physics, that energy is everything, and that there's really no material space. You know, I had a conversation with Dr. Ervin Laszlo the other day, and we were talking about the current theory, I guess, in quantum physics is that we're 99% space and 1% material. And he says to me, you know, that 1% really isn't material either. It's all energy. And I love being corrected like that because it's true. It's all energy, whether we realize it or not. And the sense that we have of that is what helps us to, especially in business, lead by example. Words don't mean anything. It's the example that you see of another and the effect they have on their immediate surroundings, and then how that ripples through the thought atmosphere, if you will, or the world, depending on the size of the business. Now, how do you see that energy to matter? Because most of us really, even though we understand that concept that it's all energy, we're still, it's like, okay, I'm still a physical being. If I step out in front of that bus and don't move, it's going to hit me, right? So how do you think that that notion of malleability, I suppose, can be more present in the agile development of business and even personal lives as we move forward in a different way coming out of this global restriction that we've had?
Everything around us energy, right? So I'll give you a very good example. The businesses are designed to make money. That's the whole idea of the business. So if it doesn't produce money, it's not a business. It might be a community of the people just hanging out together, but it's not a business. What is money? Money is energy. And I can give you a very simple example why it's energy. Because people are willing to do and spend some energy in exchange for that energy.
Trade.
So if I pay somebody money to do something for me, they're willing to do something I might not even want to do. They will do it for the money. Why? Because they generated energy in the moment I gave them the money or promised them the money to do something they wouldn't do it otherwise. So it's the best example of energy.
And although it's not, you know, there's that old axiom, is money the root of all evil. Well, it really isn't. What's what we do with it is how we treat it. It's what we're willing to do for it, and the integrity of our own moral and ethical codes that we choose to either keep or violate in doing so. Now, that kind of mentality, it seems to be more of a profit over people and planet kind of agenda, as opposed to a people and planet over profit. It doesn't eliminate profit, it just redirects how it works. Now, do you see that kind of activity at the level that you're at? And is that part of the billionaire thinking realm?
Some, very few. And the wealthy people that I've been around, they just operate based on numbers. So they look at the world as everything is like numbers, which is energy in some way too.
Mm-hmm.
They don't operate from a human being, which is, a lot of them are very nice people. Not all of them are not. Like, let's take Bezos, for example. Bezos is actually a good example of good.
Mm-hmm.
Some people find something wrong with him, which is not that hard to find with any human being. But if you're going to look overall, Bezos actually built a very good model of a business that actually one of the largest businesses in the world. It's operated as a small business, everybody being taken care of, everybody's got the best packages, like from a health perspective, they get higher rate paid than any other jobs for the same type of a job. He's really trying to take care of his customers. He's got the whole department that they do nothing but trying to figure out the human resources, how to help people, how to improve their environment, how to easier their workload, how they can increase their salaries with working actually less, not more. They treat them like a family instead of treating like a numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is
from
the
the
old
customer perspective, he's got actually the second part Amazon is the most successful business in retail resale, yet they have no competition. Yet they spend $250 million every single year. They have no competition. They still do that to figure out how to serve their clients better.
That's the kind of attitude that we're talking about. So there's two places that we operate from simultaneously, I would say, in most cases, and that's from the outer and from the inner. And the inner side of things, like you're talking about, the motivation that comes from within someone who operates like a Bezos. And that is not necessarily disclosed because the intimate conversations don't happen in order for it to be able to be exposed in most cases, unless there's an interviewer that, you know, features that, right? And yet the obvious of that inner development shows in the outer world by the way he treats people and the way that that vision for helping others and in their lives ultimately reflects on, that's the internal customer side of things, right? And without the internal customer satisfaction, happiness, you know, happy people get more done and with less supervision and far exceed any expectation you may have of them, given the tools, support, and freedom to do so. Now, that's a new model that's been presented probably in less than a decade, I would think. It's been interspersed. You know, Senge even went into it back in the 90s in the learning organization, what that was based on with the self-mastery and you know, the discipline to then ascend that into the organizational learning capacity. And yet, even though that was, and he became a corporate go-to guy, we still didn't see all that kind of activity being reflected from the corporate world. Why do you think that is, or do you feel that that my observation is consistent?
Most people of that level, including me, not that I'm of that level, I'm talking about, they're introverts and I'm an introvert. So I don't go around, I don't tell people what I do. And what people see from outside is really based on their ignorance, probably would be a good word.
Sure.
They want to see what
What is it? A 5 to 7 second preview that from which they make all of their assertions.
Right. Based on their conditioning, their fears, their envy, all the seven deadly sins included.
Right. Right.
They're looking to start judging somebody, what they're doing wrong, instead of understanding how much good they do, because they just don't go on every corner and scream that they're trying to help people and create a million jobs.
Yeah, it appears at subtle levels, almost indistinguishable, because there really is no fanfare that goes along with it.
Yeah. One of the Bezos things that most people don't know from outside, one of his goals was he wanted to create 1 million jobs. So he can help 1 million people, families, to put the food on their table and to be actually happy at the place they're working for. And as far as I know, he's the only person who achieved it on this planet until today. So it's easier to
What an example to follow.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to judge somebody from the way they look from outside, because they're still humans. They're all gonna have their flaws. Nobody's perfect, but people don't even understand his space program idea. They think, okay, he's so rich, he wants to fly people in space like wealthy people. That's not what he was trying to do. He's trying to figure out how to take the waste from this country into the space, I mean, from the world into the space. Because all this waste that's destroying this country and being polluted, he wanted to take it out. That was his goal with his space program. This is the most humble person you can think of who wants to do the most good on this planet, that anybody willing to do. He's actually doing it as we speak and taking crazy action. takes all the money that he created, try to improve the quality of life for future generations. And people find a way to find something wrong with him.
Not that I'm looking for something wrong with it. It in some ways makes sense, and it also empowers the World Future Society list of future jobs for 2030, and one of them being a space junk collector, right? It would seem, and granted, valiant effort, agreed. May not be the best way, but at least he's making an effort, and we cannot condemn him for that in any way, shape, or form, because he is taking action. It may not agree with everybody, but hey, he's taking action. In the perspective of that, it would seem like, from my perspective, there's technology available and maybe even developable at scale that can take that trash and convert it into energy somehow, like a plasma furnace, for instance, where that may be a more effective way of doing so, because it would, in a sense, not necessarily eliminate, but it would definitely reconstitute the junk into something useful, where now it's out in space, it's still junk or trash.
It burns out in the space.
Well, if
as it goes down, it actually comes to nothing.
Okay, true. Well, depending on the height of the orbit.
All right. Yeah, but yeah, it depends. Obviously, he's not going to take you like a couple 100 feet up.
Well, you know, if you get far enough out, then the orbit.
Yeah, it's actually
deteriorates
everything you're going to take out. So if we're talking about something like the batteries, right? If the plastic, they figure out the batteries, they still cannot figure out how to get rid of them, because they're going to be here a million years from now. So that might be one of the solutions. Some other stuff, yeah, the plastic, they figured out they can make clothes from a plastic, all kind of stuff. So there's a way to recycle it.
And there's smarter folks than us doing so, right?
Yeah.
They're focusing on that one specific thing and doing that incremental stuff that we've been talking about, and learning how to develop it into something useful and ultimately profitable.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it is. Elon Musk, we have the Elon Musk too. So Elon Musk might seem like some weird guy who's like very awkward and nothing good about him. And he is actually trying to figure out how to take the people from Earth when something bad will happen right now. That's his space program. The idea is to move people to Mars or something, some other safe place for civilization to survive.
Right.
He's the only one who's doing that, because it's just a matter of time until the Earth gonna go down. It's not if, it's when.
Right.
And he already started the actual program to figure out how to move people from here to another planet.
Yeah. Well, I think we're still making some assumptions that, and however, there are educated assumptions in such. I agree with that. What I find interesting, and it's kind of a wait and see thing, because he's talking about going to the moon first. I had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the 6th man on the moon. And one of the things that he explained to me, this was back in 1997, of course, he said I couldn't talk about it till after his death because it would cause problems for him if I did. And I understood it. But he said on the way down to now he was the pilot for the lunar excursion module, just to frame that proper context. So he says on the way down to the surface, he's looking out this little triangular window in the LEM, and he sees this metallic silver cylinder spiraling around them. And he said, I couldn't tell, if there were one or many, limited view, but it looked like it was about 1 meter in diameter, 3 meters long, and didn't know whether it was piloted from the surface or on board, but it definitely was not anything from Earth. So that being said, and of course, we didn't go back to the moon for quite some time. Now with Elon going there, I wonder what he's going to find and how that might change things here, if there's a compatible relationship that can be developed between whatever civilization is already there.
Dark side of the moon, yeah. I've read the theory that the moon is actually a ship, not a planet.
Right, the theory of Maldek, and that it was an escape pod basically for the remnants of what's now our asteroid belt from however long ago that destruction occurred. Um, you know, you look at things from that perspective, and yeah, it's a reasonable assumption of that's possible, right? Not knowing that there's all kinds of things we don't know about that are possible that we've proven through our advancement in science and physics, right? So, you know, all these kinds of things, and if Elon's going to have his way, that discovery is going to happen within the next, what,
10, 20
3 years
years. I don't know.
or sooner, depending on how well he's able to move
How
forward.
well the Tesla's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's another thing, you know, the construction of the batteries for electric vehicles. That's another concern there because of the way that they're made. There's a lot of pollution in that process, and how, you know, so, and they're working towards changing that to make it more pollutant free. And you know, in time, I would imagine that's probably going to happen. So short term, it's like the Industrial Revolution, right? We had no idea, speaking of Ford again, we had no idea what fossil fuels would do to the planet. And yet we did our best to include those in order for us to develop and figure out how to transport ourselves from one place to another more effectively. We can't deny or even judge that. It was just a lack of information we had at the time. And now, you know, we have a tendency to condemn those people because they developed it without forethought. Well, we didn't know. It's just that simple. So why do we carry that judgment with us? And here's a good question. In the development of technology and businesses and failures and things like that, how do we move or step back from that tendency to want to judge those failures harshly for ourselves and others, or seeming failures? How do you find that in the work that you do? Because I know it's got to be, you know, between the self-deprecation that's unspoken and the outer references of, you know, oh, I really screwed up on that one or whatever. You know, how do you get through that with others?
I don't know.
Well, you've been pretty effective at it, so that you got to have some great response, though. But if you did know, right, I'm going to flip that. If you did know, or imagine that you could know, what might that knowing be?
There's like too much we don't know. I'm not trying to focus on, obviously, first, we cannot judge any. I don't judge anything or anybody because I'm not that smart. And I go by the model. The more I learn, the stupider I get, not smarter.
Yeah, I hear you on that one.
Yeah, so I just try to simplify everything, just do simple things at a time. I'm not trying to look at the global world and see what I can or not, and I would never judge anybody. And people come to me with different crazy ideas. I'm saying, okay, that's great. That just, I don't know anything about it. Go try it. Try to prove the world. There's a crazy good technologies there today that the government doesn't let them be, like hydro technology. There's actually technology. People came to me, asked me for money at venture capital fund. They have like an amazing technology. They take the salt water from the ocean and produce electricity, and the byproduct is purified water. This technology has been around for a long time. They figure out how to make it commercially available to people.
Roy McAllister, years ago, he was president of the American Hydrogen Association. They had a device that could both desalinate the water, produce hydrogen and purified water and electricity. And so, you know, it's been around, and that's been 30 years ago.
Right. There came up today that you can do it globally, and I tried to pull it in Los Angeles. I went to start talking to local. I mean, they have a shortening on water every single year. They have a dry out, and I have a solution. I can give you clean water, and I can give you the electricity. Let's get it going. He said, nope, we're not gonna do it.
Mhm.
I've tried all the other states near the ocean because we need to be close to the ocean to get the salt water out.
Sure.
And nobody would want to work with us. It's the governments are still very close-minded.
Well, and this brings in the point of, the organization that I just stepped into, Live and Let Live, and the two phases that it represents. The live side of it is basically addressing how aggression has been able to be allowed through our laws and legislation, and the other side's more of a moral code of just being a good human. That's the Let Live side. And from a legal standpoint, it would seem that overall, and granted, we're not going to change it today or tomorrow, but overall, that understanding the legal and legislative systems, which most people have just disavowed themselves of because it's just too much of a mess and they don't want to waste their time with it. However, if one or many were to develop the understanding, the methodologies to address the laws and the legislation and restore the leadership in them that would support this, then over time we could remove those aggressive tactics of the profiteers, because those are the ones that are usually oil and gas industry, right? They've got a corner on the market. Well, and many of them are looking into the alternative energy fields. And yet, long term, we're faced with how do we retrofit 1 billion fossil fuel vehicles, right? So those are the kind of situations that we don't think of because they're too large. And so we, like you say, we keep it simple, and those kinds of things we don't necessarily think about. In the process, though, it would seem, and I'm kind of asking you, could that kind of effort towards addressing the laws and legislative systems in the world be effective enough to bring us back into an environmentally safe balance?
I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, because people in government been installed by people who's in charge of the oil industry and electrical industry and atomic, developments, and they cannot afford, or they will lose their position to go against them. They're just not going to be in the government anymore.
Well,
and there's a good movie, The Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
They're covering that point that every single person in the government go there with the good ideas, how they want to help people, being a good human being. And within 3 to 5 years, they become a politician like everybody else.
Right.
And they forget everything why they got there in the first place.
Now, this brings up the Howard Bloom's book, The Lucifer Principle, and his study of history and how a few people have manipulated masses, sometimes entire populations, by telling lies over and over again and controlling the media stream, whether it be a town crier or the internet. When people, it appears that many are awakening as a result of this massive sequestration that took place a couple of years ago, and they're starting to question their own power and effectivity in being able to move the needle, so to speak. Do you see that opportunity? And granted, it may not happen in our lifetimes. However, I'm not going to eliminate the possibility, because as you behave in more harmony, the time it takes to do things lessens because there's minimized or mitigated distractions in that process. And I'm sure you've seen that in your business endeavors. And it's something that just seems like an ancillary learning of what happens because of how it happens. And you don't realize it till afterwards. You look back and go, wow, that's, you unpack or debrief how it happened. And that's one of the things that comes up. So do you see that taking place to where people are starting to ask the questions and move in that direction?
No, we're definitely moving in that direction. The obvious that we can see right now, people like Bezos and Elon Musk, they're already trying to figure out what they can do to improve this
But how do we
Two
clone them?
richest people in the world right now.
So how do we clone them, or at least clone that attitude?
It's a process. It's a process. Before, all the richest people in the world were all about the profit at their own things. None of them really try to figure out how to make something better. I think Bill Gates was the first one who said, okay, I think I want to start doing philanthropy. And the only reason he even got there because of his wife. It's his wife fund. But she kind of pushed him into it. He divorced later on, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
On its own. She kind of pushed him into philanthropy, and then Warren Buffett stepped up and he said, yeah, I want to start, giving money away. So
They can't take it with you, right?
yeah,
What
but
else are
this
you
is
gonna do with it?
new. This has never happened before. So there's definitely a progress. So that's the older guys. Then we have a little bit younger guys like Elon Musk and Bezos, who's still in like their early 50s. And Elon Musk is just only 50. So there's still a potential that the next generation is going to get better and better and better, because you see it already. Elon Musk was early 50s and Bezos, so they're already doing better than Warren Buffett was willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Warren Buffett almost 30 years older than they are.
Right. It's interesting that these things have happened in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
And
never happened before in the history of the world.
so there's hope.
There's a progress in the right direction. There's definitely, I think people become a little bit more spiritual. If you're going to do research, like spirituality became like extremely popular in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Since 2002, it's became like increased like by 20 or 30%, which is a huge number.
Do you think that's because of the uneasiness that people have felt about what's been going on in the world and around them? Or is it something that has naturally emerged, or maybe even a little of both?
Most of the people are good by nature. If we're going to go to basic psychology, right? Because I've got PhD in that. If we're going to go, most people do not know that actually 75% of people want to be good. There's another 25% people who do not want to be good. That's the people who, like, they'll steal. They're not going to feel any guilt. They can take advantage of the opportunity without any disregard.
And psychologically, I would say probably at least 24% of those, allowing for the 1% for the psychopaths, the 24% of those may be just damaged from their own.
It's conditioning, right? They were conditioned this way. They grow up in a wrong environment, but it's still, that's the way they are. But let's not look at that. Let's look that we actually have a 75% of the people who actually want to be good. Either religious people, they're spiritual people, and they strive to be good human beings, and they want to be in good environment, and they want to help others, and they want to be people of service. That's a huge part of this world. And it doesn't mean that all the rich people in 25%, this is not true.
Oh, absolutely.
Good bulk of them in 75%, and we just covered quite a few of them today. And there's a lot more people that we just don't know about who's billionaires and help people. They're just not public figures
yet.
They don't go around and tell everybody what they do.
Right.
Because they do it because that's what makes them feel good, not because they want a publicity.
Oh yeah, that's the heroes in the trenches, right? That they're not there for notoriety or fame. They're just there because they're doing what they feel is the right thing to do and applying their focus in doing so. And the rest of it doesn't matter. Some of those, like you say, are building the businesses, the doing the things like you did, where they start with just wanting to help other people, and then it grows from there. And the difference in the supply chain now is beginning to shift from the old, the military is a huge economy, right? And if we were to really look at things in America, that's what our economy is built on, is the defense budget. And so that's another fear that's present, is if we start redirecting that money to other peaceful things, then that economy is going to crumble. And well, that's not necessarily the case. There's going to be some adjustments as we move that focus from the fear to the love, right? And we all will have to suck it up for this short term in order for that to happen, as those 75% gain more power and want to help others do the same.
Yeah, economics are very complex. There's not a single human being on this planet that understands economics. If there would be, that person probably would be working White House, and we would never have any issues. We would have a perfect economy forever and never had any problems on any level, which is, it's impossible.
Right.
But the money, people don't understand, they don't evaporate. So they're just going to be shifting to a different industry. So if US has today $43 trillion printed, if we're going to put it on the table, no matter what happens to the economy, it's not going to change. The money just going to change the pockets.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to evaporate. So economically, no matter what's going on, we're still going to have the same amount of money in the economy. As long as the people operate not from fear, but from love, to want to share this money, to give this money, to hire people, to buy produce, to support their farmers and stuff, we're never going to have a problem. It's irrelevant what stock market is doing. The stock market actually horrible for economy. It's not good. As a stock
Again, it goes into
market
that
as well.
marginalization, like Bloom was saying. That's how that's one of the narratives that controls the stasis, if you will, within.
Right. It takes the money out of the economy and give it to the rich people. The people who owns this company. So people complain about this. Some people have all this wealth. Why? Because the masses give it to them in a way of investments. Because the wealth of Elon Musk is not how much money he's got in the bank, but what his equity of the company in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. If people are going to stop investing tomorrow, he's going to be broke.
So do you see the investment trends changing?
It's not going to change, because the economically, people going from fear, they think if stock market goes down, it's the end of the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're afraid they're going to lose something, so they find something
And the
that
fear
they
is,
need is going to.
it's economically, people are going to be too scared to go out. And the problem, the way the economy is built right now, you cannot pull the money out, because all those companies are going to start collapsing, because that's how they survive. They do not survive on profits that a company make. They survive on investments that people make.
Mm-hmm.
Company like Uber, that everybody have heard of, actually losing billions of dollars every single year. They haven't made a single profit yet. The only reason it's the large company and everybody knows about it, the owners are so rich, because of the people investments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Once
I
people
noticed
decide to stop investing, it's going to be over.
there was an S&P 500 chart that I saw the other day of the largest companies in the world, and how their 2022 numbers are vastly different. Netflix being the top one, and almost 65-66% down. And of course, then it makes you wonder, well, how's that happening? One of those probably is that people are sharing their login information rather than paying
No,
for
I
it.
think they're competition, because
It's a
they have the
competition.
Hulu and Peacock and ABC, everybody creating their own networks now.
Right, and they were kind of like Blockbuster to begin with, when nobody else was doing it. They, same with PayPal, right? Nobody else was doing it, and now there's many. But that innovation that spurs us forward and kind of implores us to be better at what we're doing and in the way that we're serving over time, would seem to indicate that this evolutionary process that we're in, personally, professionally, environmentally, spiritually even, is pointing toward a better result over the next 10 to 15, maybe a couple of generations, and that we may indeed find our way out of the current crises that we're experiencing. I think humanity is resilient and innovative, and I'm sure you do too, as you've experienced in the business world. How can we apply those same principles on a practical, personal level in daily lives, or in our daily lives, to make that difference within ourselves? Because it boils down to the individual. You were right, it's not a collective. You got to do it for yourself first. So speaking from self first and in the self-love, what do you recommend as a simple process to put yourself through in order to accentuate that positive within you?
I think Einstein already did it. He said, just be a man of service. Don't try to be a man of volume.
And things, one of the things that we talked about the other day was the Enneagram and the importance of it. There's many tools that are available for us to inquire more about ourselves and how we are, and to get kind of a reflection, is to see ourselves in different ways and compare what we perceive ourselves to be and what the survey says, right? What significance is the Enneagram?
I like Enneagram because it explains people's personality, but you have to remember the personality is just conditioning and psychology that you develop before age of 14. But there's other things that I use in order to understand somebody better and understand yourself better. But the Enneagram is a good start, and you can do it for free online.
Right. Well, you've got the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Colby, 4 colors.
There's a million.
It's an endless list of things, and so perhaps maybe the good advice would be to go out and look for those kinds of things and just start some self-assessments and use the free tools, because there's no excuse not to.
Yeah, it's free. I mean, there's a lot of great free tools online to understand yourself better. And be open that you are not what you think you are.
Right.
Because everybody want to think that we are better than we really are. And in the business, it's extremely evident, like everybody's trying to operate on their strengths. Something, and that's not how you become successful. You have to understand your weaknesses. If you don't understand your weaknesses and cover your holes in your bucket, the water will always leak. You will never get from point A to point B.
Right.
I don't care how strong you are and how beautiful the bucket is. It might be made out of a gold and the most amazing materials and that, but it's got holes in it.
Sounds like you're kind of pointing a finger towards the strengths movement and the deficits in it, which I tend to agree. You need, strengths are one thing, operate on that, build yourself, and yet it's the weaknesses that you address and transcend from that truly make the difference in the overall results.
Yeah. And make little changes, like small changes, improving the weaknesses. Don't worry about strengths, they're going to be there. You don't need to capitalize on strengths because they're going to be there. Yeah. The weaknesses is the one that's missing.
Yeah, be vulnerable enough to look at your weaknesses, huh?
Yeah, everybody want to work on weakness, on the strengths. There's no need to work on them. You're really strong, and your strengths work on your weaknesses.
Exactly. So we're about out of time. What if there were one thing that you could offer the audience that you believe would be something of significance? What would you part with?
I have a 3-pillar model that I work with for myself and everybody like that I work with. That's understand yourself, understand others, is to develop a higher level self-awareness as high as you possibly can. And number 3, which is very important, you have to manage your expectations. Nobody's perfect around you. You cannot expect things from people that they cannot deliver. You cannot expect from yourself things that you cannot deliver. And yet, you should not expect from yourself less than you can deliver.
Very good. Alex, this has been such an enjoyable apocalyptic chat. And I appreciate your time and your energy and your expertise in sharing your insight and wisdom.
Thank you.
And namaste and in la catch. Thanks for sticking with us through this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.